Are you being greenwashed right now? Thousands of companies are doing it right now, at this very second, greenwashing you into thinking that their product is sustainable, or that by them making some decision that they are becoming more sustainable. But is that really true? There is a trade-off to every decision. And what companies don't tell you is what are those negative impacts by them making these decisions. So what happens when the negative impact that that company has by making that decision is something that you really value? Like, this stops the production of plastic, but it chops down a bunch more trees in the process. And the companies aren't going to advertise the negative impacts that they're having. So where do you go to find this information? Well, Thomas and his team at Greenr decided to take this problem head on. And so, to not waste any more time, let's get on in. Thomas, do you mind telling us a bit more about Greenr and what you do?
Yeah, nice one. So Greenr is essentially being built to make sustainable shopping really more accessible to the consumers. There's a big disconnect between sort of the sustainable consumer product world and the mainstream consumer product world. And we want to sort of bring those two together. But where it all started was in a field, actually. So I had a company before and we collected leftover festival tents to be upcycled and repurposed into new products, or if they were good enough, to tents again. And one thing that was really clear from working with people and other vendors and festival goers was that they're really keen to shop more sustainably, but they don't know where to find these products all in one place. They don't trust all the time that it is more sustainable or better impact because there's a lot of greenwashing around. And they don't want to have to spend the time in their lives having to change big consumer habits to be more sustainable. So essentially what we're trying to do is make that journey more accessible by making it transparent, giving quantifiable data, and aggregating all of those products into one place for consumers to find easily.
Yeah, so lots of people want to be more sustainable. They want to make those good choices, but it's just extremely difficult to do so because it's not as transparent as we wish it could be. And I think that being able to, create a platform where people can actually access that data is going to be huge. And how will you be going about allowing people to be posting products on your page? Are you going to vet them beforehand?
Yeah, no, great question. And I think this is one of the things that we really wanted to tackle was, you see a lot of marketplaces or sustainable stores which don't really tell you how it's done, but why they decided those products were sustainable or better impact. So our process is that obviously brands can register to want to sell with us, and then they have to go through a vetting process before that gets approved and we onboard them. And without going all into the nitty gritty of it, but essentially looking at their brand, the ethos of the brand, the commitments and the certifications that that brand has to make sure that they're ethical. But then when they're talking about their products, we're looking at what they consider to be better impact about their product and giving us the evidence that we can then review to make that decision. But then on top of that, the thing that pulls us apart is the fact that we ask for materials data and weights on those materials so that then we can actually quantify data behind it and say that you're saving this much CO2 emissions, water or plastic through every product that you're buying on the platform. And that's how we can gauge that that is a better impact product versus the standard traditional product that you might get anywhere else. So, comparing a plastic toothbrush to a bamboo toothbrush, we're able to gauge, well, how much impact is that having? Is it better? Is it worse? And then we're able to give that data in a really transparent and open way. But of course, the brand wouldn't be on there unless they pass that vetting process anyway. So you've got that due diligence done beforehand.
Gotcha. That's really good to know, especially for consumers who want to be sustainable and don't want to be fooled by all the greenwashing out there. So that's definitely very important.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's very easy to say something is better impact, and it's very easy to say that it's vegan, it's biodegradable, so therefore it's better, right? But I think that for the mainstream consumer, you don't always know what that means. And there's a lot of assumptions within our community that everyone just understands what we're talking about. And actually, if we're going to reach out to a wider audience and make this more of a mainstream movement, you have to break it down and just make it really accessible, really transparent, and really honest. And one of the biggest parts of what we're doing at Greenr is saying better, not best, because nothing is perfect, right? Every product has an impact, every person has an impact. So if we're honest and transparent about that, more people will relate to that and understand it as well.
Right. Yeah. And thing that's kind of goes off that too is like some things might be good in certain circumstances. So like having a certain type of plastic that can break down in certain situations actually is better than having material that's actually going to break down too early or too soon, or actually run the risk of like not being able to perform the function that it's supposed to do. So really being able to say like, okay, this is great for these situations, and this is great for these situations. Not like, oh, this plastic is all bad, and that
well, absolutely,
these solutions are better.
It's very nuanced to each of its situation, right? Each and every situation is different. And also I think what's really important is that there's a big movement for plastic free living and these things, which is really important from the scale of plastic that's out there and the scale of single use plastic particularly. But for example, going back to the example of a plastic toothbrush versus a bamboo toothbrush, well, it takes more water in the life cycle and production of that bamboo toothbrush than it does a plastic toothbrush. So if you really care about water use and water production and water sustainability, actually bamboo isn't the most sustainable because it takes more water to produce. However, if you care about the carbon emissions, the fact that plastic is oil based ultimately, and it's a finite resource, and we shouldn't really be digging out of the ground at the scale of which we are, then the overall consumption, the overall impact of that bamboo toothbrush is actually better in the longer run. So you've got to weigh up those different things. And the beauty of us not just looking at plastic, not just looking at carbon, not just looking at water, is we can take that wider stance and say, yeah, this is better here, but not better here, and then give you an overall transparency and then let you make that decision, right? You can read that and you can go, yeah, that makes sense, I'll get that. Or actually, that hasn't convinced me, I'll go on to the next product and see what that's about. And that it's all about that openness.
Right. Have you thought about maybe like when a first family comes onto your platform, being able to have them answer like a questionnaire about what's important to them, and then suggesting certain products based on, I'm very passionate about water preservation, or I'm very passionate about plastic free, or something like that. Have you ever considered that for your platform?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things that is really important with any movement like this is consumer preference. And that comes, all the way down from how we build the business to how we market the business to then how we sort of use, consumer data that they're willing to give. And I think if, exactly as you say, if a consumer has more of a preference on carbon emissions or more of a preference on water saving, then we're able to sort of prioritize products which might suit them better as a consumer compared to someone who cares most about plastic and all they care is about plastic, right? And equally though, I think what's really important is what we're trying to do is do it by space as well. So real living spaces. So let's take a living room and being able to see products which we all know and have in this room, but actually seeing what better impact products there are which you might not have considered before. Because yes, you might really care about water, the amount of water that's used in that production, but actually they might be very similar, the mainstream product and the better impact product, but there might be something else which makes that better impact product more sustainable. And then it's about educating and being open about that, and again allowing the consumer to have that accessibility, because ultimately that's what makes this any sort of business mainstream or movement mainstream.
So with products that you put on your platform, are you going to be comparing them to products that are out there, so you have like a side-by-side comparison, or is it going to be just this option and then these are reasons why it's sustainable for these type of things?
Yeah, so a little bit of both. Primarily, we're looking at sort of why this is sustainable and giving you information about what that better impact means and how you can digest that and understand that as an individual. But equally, that impact data that we're giving, we're not, we're saying that you're saving water or you're saving plastic or you're saving carbon emissions. Well, that's got to be compared against something. So what we do through our sort of data pack and research in the background is put together a bunch of averages of those standard consumer products, right? So we find what is the most used, product out there that's mainstream at the moment, and what is this better impact product, and how do they compare? And then that data is sort of aggregated by comparing the two. But ultimately, it's about making people realize that it might not be better in every single sense, but it might be better overall. And actually, that's more important. 45% of global emissions come from consumer products, the manufacture, the distribution, the consumption. And if we're going to reduce that, it's not about trying to say we need to get that down to zero. It's about saying, well, out of all of those, let's break it down and find better impact, because then altogether that will reduce that number, dramatically. And that's what's the important sort of action there.
Right. It's really about being able to take what's out there and minimize what's happening, rather than just say, okay, we gotta scrap it.
Yeah, and it doesn't work. It doesn't work if nothing works with that sudden change to consumer lifestyle, because one of the things that we've really noticed is that a lot of platforms are trying to essentially change consumer habits, right, and get consumer social wants and needs to change, and that takes hundreds of years, realistically. So to try and do that from a business perspective, or even just from the climate movement perspective, it's not realistic. So my previous work, when I worked for Greenpeace as an international organization, it's not about trying to get individuals to change every aspect of their life. It's about making sure that businesses, governments are tackling these individual problems, which then all add up to have a better impact and then produce a more sustainable life, right? It's not about completely reinventing the wheel, because there's a lot of stuff which is really good, and we can utilize that to then make society better. And that's what it's all about.
Definitely. You hit on so many good points, especially it's the steady increase of little things all put together is definitely huge. So what are your goals for 2022 in terms of social media marketing?
Yeah, so in terms of social media marketing and ultimately all marketing for Greenr, it is all about community. Anything that we do through marketing and through social media is about bringing and allowing more people to join that community and that movement, so that they feel a part of the business. So with social media, when we're producing content or videos or even just links through to our website or links through to our blogs or whatever, it's all about making sure that people feel like it's accessible to them. It's very easy to reproduce content on social media, especially when you're a green company. You can say exactly the same things that 50,000 other companies are saying on the same post with a different design or picture behind it. And I think what we're trying to break out of that mold is by saying, well, the reason that has worked well in the eco sort of community is that it really speaks to them. But there's this huge plethora of other people and mainstream consumers who don't necessarily relate to the tone, the message, the content type. And if we're going to try and make that more accessible to them and understandable to them, then the content that we're producing has to reciprocate that and mirror that. So a lot of our social media marketing and my co-founder Hugo, who sort of runs our marketing side of the business, we really focus on that tone and that accessibility. And I mean, primarily we're looking at sort of modern social media, right? So TikTok, Instagram, and even then breaking out of those traditional social media sort of platforms and looking at community-based platforms, so like Discord or Discourse, and bringing people together where they can talk to each other, right? Because one of the restrictions of social media has been that it's been a post and then you can comment on it and you can reply to comments, but that's really it. But we want to try and have that interaction with consumers. So bringing that community into one place, hearing what they like, hearing what they're saying, getting them to sort of mold us as a business rather than necessarily us just churning out information, because it doesn't work like that anymore.
Definitely, really being able to feel where the market is and get that market feedback is really important for any business to really be able to grow and adapt and change, because the market's ever changing and you have to be able to react to that quickly, and being able to build that community of people who are being interactive and understanding what you're coming from is definitely huge.
I think
sure.
also from our perspective, because we're targeting such quite a wide consumer market, really, there are certain breakdowns within that. So we know that younger people have quite an impact on parents and grandparents, right? Because they listen to their kids when they're saying about issues or climate issues or whatever the sort of message is, that eventually feeds through. And that is traditionally not always been that way. It's been listen to your elders, respect your elders, they'll tell you what to do, you follow them. And I think that what we've seen on social media is that sort of flip of power dynamics. So younger people are leading those movements. So for us to interact with those people, that actually means that we're interacting with more people, because if we just targeted Facebook ads, for example, Facebook isn't used a lot by Gen Z and Gen Alpha anymore. Whereas if we're going to target that group, then we can target using Instagram, TikTok, particularly Discord, and then they will then influence their Facebook counterparts. And then we'll end up having a community on Facebook without necessarily putting all of our effort into building that community on Facebook. So you have this sort of reciprocity of communities helping and building each other.
Definitely. And how do you kind of foster that? Do you look to try to have incentives for other channels to bring people into each group or setting?
Yeah, I think ultimately yes is the answer to that. Yes, we want people to encourage their friends, their families, their people that they meet when they're just discussing business conferences to talk and engage more people on those platforms and bring them from one community into the other community. I think that probably one of the things that it really sort of ironically, I was talking with my CTO earlier today, and we were talking about the raising of tickets for like platform issues or things that our community think might be better to improve the platform and stuff like that. And actually the crossover between social community and our consumer community, and then the people within that who have tech sort of advice or tech knowledge, actually can come into that other community as well, and vice versa. So we find ourselves absolutely that sort of the way to do that is to nurture the consumer as your loudhailer. So they will be your salesperson. And just from a sort of wider marketing sort of perspective and sort of sales perspective, one of the things that we're really keen to bring in later down the line, perhaps, is the ability for consumers to essentially all be influencers. So they all have affiliate links, right? They all have the ability to send people through their link to our platform and become salespeople. So then you're not just making people feel like they're involved and they can talk and they can discuss the community, but actually they can influence what happens on that platform as well. And that's going to be really important for the next generation of sort of internet in general, is that sort of decentralized ownership. But actually, more importantly, and I think when you say decentralized ownership, you can sort of go into Web3 and all sorts of stuff like that. But if you think about the heart of that, it's community. It's letting people feel like and actually have ownership over what they're buying and what they're selling. And at the heart of it for us, that means utilizing all of our platforms, social media or otherwise, to allow that crossover between different communities so that they all feel involved and they all feel valued.
That's incredible. Especially think about a person wants to feel connection. And when they feel that connection, it makes it so much easier to go the next step and getting more involved and be more willing to spend money or do other things, or tell other people about you, really be able to become involved. And that's definitely the key for you and bringing other people from different platforms, for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think, we see it even at such an early stage that we have a community which is already reaching out to other people and bringing them in without us having to sort of push that, because people are interested and feel like they're a part of the community already, which is really important.
Okay, so just to wrap it up a little bit here, so what is one way for somebody to reach out to you, the one best way to kind of get in touch with you guys if they want to learn more, if they want to become part of the Greenr community?
Yeah, so I think the obvious answer is to sort of follow all of our socials at Shop Greenr. But actually, and particularly I am really keen on nurturing one-to-one networking and connections so that we can teach, educate, but also listen and learn from people who have expertise in different areas. And the best place for me is always LinkedIn, right? So don't it generally isn't a very cool place to connect with people anymore. It's very businessy, but actually when I'm talking with people and networking, and if you want to know more really about the heart and soul of Greenr, reach out to me. Have something that you are going to ask which is unique. I mean, look, this is why we're on a call, because you reached out to me directly on LinkedIn and you came and you were very personalized, and I felt like, yeah, I want to speak to this guy. If someone messaged me with a generic message, it's harder for me to engage with it, right? So you want to ask, know what you want to be involved with, and come and join the community. Like, we're all here to just have fun. We're all here to talk about the next step of sort of the internet, and yeah, we're excited and we want people to be involved.
That's awesome. Very cool. Thanks for that.